Spider-Man is winning again. And that's exactly why the latest comments coming out of Disney are raising so many eyebrows. With Spider-Man Brand New Day reportedly soaring past $1.1 billion worldwide, Sony and Marvel have every reason to celebrate. The character is once again proving that Spider-Man remains one of the most powerful names in the entire superhero business. But right in the middle of that success, a statement attributed to Disney CEO Josh D'Amaro has sparked a completely different conversation. Because instead of simply celebrating Spider-Man's comeback, the comments reportedly focused heavily on DEI, future character changes, and negotiations with Sony over upcoming Spider-Man movies. And if you're wondering why that matters, just wait until you hear what was reportedly said about the future of Spider-Man 5, Spider-Man 6, and beyond. Before we get into all of it, if you're new to the Woke Watch, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we cover the biggest Hollywood and entertainment stories as they develop. Now let's break down what is happening. There is no denying that Spider-Man is having a massive moment right now. Spider-Man. Brand New Day has reportedly crossed the $1.1 billion mark worldwide, putting the movie among the biggest recent successes for the superhero genre. And that's significant for more than just Sony. Marvel benefits from it, Disney benefits from it, the entire Spider-Man brand benefits from it. After years of questions surrounding the superhero movie industry, Spider-Man is once again demonstrating something that Hollywood has known for decades. When audiences connect with the character, they will show up. The movie has also reportedly received strong reactions from both audiences and critics, giving Sony and Marvel another reason to believe that the Spider-Man franchise still has enormous long-term potential. And based on the current momentum, some projections are already suggesting that the movie could potentially push toward the $2 billion range if its theatrical run continues at this pace. That's obviously a massive win, but this is where things get interesting. Because while Sony and Marvel are celebrating one of their biggest victories in years, the conversation surrounding the future direction of Spider-Man has suddenly become much more complicated. And the reason is Disney. According to the claims presented in the original discussion, Disney CEO Josh D'Amaro has been emphasizing diversity, equity, and inclusion as an important part of the company's future strategy. The argument being made is that Disney has spent the last several months taking a somewhat quieter approach to DEI compared with previous years. But now, according to the statement being discussed, that approach could once again become much more prominent. And that's where Spider-Man enters the picture. The reported comments suggest that Disney wants DEI to remain an important consideration when developing future Spider-Man projects in partnership with Sony. That includes conversations surrounding future characters, supporting roles, and potentially new interpretations of characters within the Spider-Man universe. And immediately, that raises an obvious question. Why make this the focus immediately after Spider-Man has delivered such a massive box office victory? That's the part that has many people questioning the strategy. The statement attributed to D'Amaro reportedly emphasized that Disney wants its partnership with Sony to continue while also placing greater importance on diversity and representation in future Spider-Man projects. The comments reportedly described these plans as a way of connecting the franchise with audiences from different cultures and backgrounds around the world. The broader argument is that these changes aren't supposed to be political. Instead, they're being presented as a business strategy designed to expand the global audience for Spider-Man and strengthen the character's appeal across international markets. And the statement reportedly went even further. It suggested that Disney wants to apply a similar philosophy to other major franchises that aren't directly connected to Spider-Man. That would include future Marvel projects and other Disney properties. The message being presented to investors and customers is essentially this: Disney wants DEI to remain part of its long-term business strategy. And if people interpret those decisions as political, the argument from Disney's side is that they're looking at it primarily through a business and global audience perspective. Now that's where the debate really begins. There's an important detail that sometimes gets lost whenever people discuss Spider-Man's future. Sony has significant control over the Spider-Man movie franchise. This isn't simply another Marvel character where Disney can make every decision by itself. The complicated Sony-Marvel relationship goes back years, and the agreement that eventually brought Spider-Man into the Marvel Cinematic Universe became one of the biggest deals in modern superhero movie history. So when we're talking about future Spider-Man films, Disney isn't operating completely independently. Sony has a major voice, Sony has major creative involvement, and Sony ultimately has enormous influence over where the franchise goes. That's why these reported discussions are so interesting. If Disney really wants to push particular changes into future Spider-Man projects, Sony would have to agree to them. And that's far from guaranteed. There is another financial component here as well. Disney and Sony don't simply split everything surrounding Spider-Man in the same way. The financial arrangements surrounding the character are complicated, and Sony retains major interests in the theatrical side of the franchise. Disney, however, also has enormous influence across the broader Marvel ecosystem and merchandise business. So both companies have reasons to protect what Spider-Man represents. And right now, Spider-Man is representing a gigantic amount of money. This is what makes the entire situation so fascinating. Imagine having one of your biggest superhero successes in years. The movie crosses $1 billion. Audiences are responding positively. The franchise is showing enormous commercial strength. And everyone should be talking about the fact that Spider-Man has once again proven his staying power. Instead, the conversation suddenly shifts toward potential future character changes and DEI initiatives. That's why some fans are asking whether this is really the message Disney should be emphasizing right now, because the success of Brand New Day could actually be viewed as evidence that audiences don't necessarily need massive changes to the formula. People showed up for Spider-Man, they responded to the character, they responded to the story, and the movie made an enormous amount of money. So the obvious question becomes, why mess with something that's working? That's the concern being raised by critics of the strategy. And this is where speculation about the next Spider-Man movies becomes especially interesting. There have already been discussions and rumors about future installments, including potential plans for Spider-Man 5 and Spider-Man 6. Exactly which characters will appear remains a major question. And depending on how long Tom Holland remains in the role, there is also the much bigger question of what happens after his version of Peter Parker eventually moves on. Will Holland continue? Will another actor eventually take over? Will Sony reboot the franchise again? Or will Marvel and Sony continue expanding the existing version of the Spider-Man universe? Nobody knows exactly how that will play out yet. But if the reported comments about future character changes are accurate, then the decisions made over the next few years could have a huge impact on the franchise. Some critics are specifically worried about the possibility of changing established characters simply to satisfy representation goals. Others argue that there's nothing inherently wrong with introducing different interpretations of characters as long as the story itself works. And that's ultimately where the discussion should go. Not whether representation exists, but whether the story is actually good. Because audiences have repeatedly demonstrated that they will support diverse characters when they are given compelling stories, strong personalities, and meaningful roles. And this isn't only about Spider-Man. The reported comments also point toward a larger question about the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If Disney intends to make DEI a major consideration across multiple franchises, how will that affect upcoming Avengers projects? How will it affect new characters? How will it affect classic Marvel characters? And most importantly, will these decisions begin with the story, or will the story be built around the decisions? That distinction matters, because audiences can usually tell when a character exists because the story genuinely needs them versus when a character appears to satisfy an external requirement. And Marvel has already spent several years trying to rebuild audience confidence. That's why the success of Spider-Man Brand New Day is so important. It gives Marvel and Sony something they desperately need: momentum. The last thing either company should want is to create unnecessary controversy around a franchise that is currently performing extremely well. Now comes the biggest question of all. Will Sony actually go along with Disney's reported plans? That's something we simply don't know yet. Sony has every reason to protect Spider-Man. The character is one of the most valuable entertainment properties in the world, and the current box office performance only proves that. If audiences are responding this strongly, Sony's safest move is to stick with what already works. That means strong storytelling, familiar characters, big action, and above all, a Spider-Man people actually want to watch. Because of that, some fans are urging Sony to avoid any outside pressure that could affect the creative direction of future films. Whether Sony agrees is still unclear. At its core, this debate isn't about whether Disney should reach global audiences. Of course it should. The real question is how that is done. If representation fits naturally into the story, most viewers don't mind it. But when established characters are changed without strong creative reasons, backlash becomes likely. And Spider-Man is a franchise where that risk is especially high. This character has decades of history and a massive global fan base. Right now, Sony and Marvel have something extremely valuable: a Spider-Man film performing at huge box office levels. So the real question isn't whether the franchise should grow. It should. The question is whether the core formula that made Spider-Man successful will be protected. If Brand New Day continues its run toward $2 billion, it sends a clear message to Hollywood. Audiences are still ready to show up for superhero films when the story works. They just need a reason to care. And Spider-Man has clearly given them that again. Now everything depends on what Sony and Disney do next. Do they build on this success? Do they make careful, balanced changes? Or do they risk decisions that could push away the very audience that made this success possible? That's still unknown. But one thing is clear, Spider-Man is once again at the center of the superhero world, and the next moves from Sony and Disney could define whether this becomes a new golden era or another major controversy. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.